You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, I'm joined by Guerin, the co-founder and head of growth at Gradguide. Ian, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me on, Rian. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Pleasure to have you on. Lots to talk about, but let's start with your early days. Actually, I was doing research on you, and don't get freaked out. I didn't dive too deep, but we've got a fair few mutual friends on Facebook, like 13 or 14. I know her, but I know her brother much better. Ellen Scully. I'm good friends with James for 15, 20 years. Stephen Breen, Samantha Mulvey, a couple of other people. But that aside, I didn't ask them any questions, by the way. I'm assuming you grew up in Dublin.
I did indeed, yeah.
What was life like growing up in Dublin?
Yeah, not too bad. Like, I was lucky enough. I went to Belvedere College, so where I got my secondary school education. So, was fortunate enough to avail of that. Pretty much standard enough upbringing. Grew up in Portmarnock, in North County Dublin. So, yeah, I had a pretty standard enough childhood. Managed to do a decent leaving cert, not a great one, but a decent one. Get into DCU, so kind of stayed in that North Dublin bubble for the first 23 years of my life. And then, funny enough, you mentioned Samantha and Ellen. They were actually in my masters in DCU, so that's where I met them. So yeah, 23, 24 years. Pretty standard kind of upbringing. Day one here and there. Small bit of traveling, nothing too major, but yeah, fairly run of the mill upbringing just in Dublin.
I know you're into sports, the gym. I think you were part of some cricket thing in college. Rugby is big in your life, if I'm correct, on Facebook, MMA as well. But sticking with your early days, one of the questions I like to ask guests, and if you've listened to the podcast, you'll know what I'm about to ask, is around impact and influence. They can usually pick an acquaintance, a close relative, a distant relative, a teacher who had an impact on them that impacted the person they were today back when they had an impact on them. Does anyone spring to mind for you?
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough, like you mentioned sport there, like coaches and managers I've had growing up. So yeah, I have a background in cricket, in rugby in school, and also club rugby as well. And then, as you touched on there, MMA / jiu-jitsu is like the primary sport that I would focus on, kind of one of the martial arts, that would be the main focus. So I think one of my coaches from there, so I started that when I was around 21, kind of fell out of love with rugby after I finished school, just kind of lost interest in it when there was, I suppose, less structure around it, and found my way into MMA, and then jiu-jitsu was a derivative of that. And Chris Fields, who's a head coach at Team KF, as is now formerly known as SPG Sword. So he came from that same group of the Conor McGregor, the Ashton Dailies, the Cathal Pendreds, that initial Irish group, the Irish Waves that went to UFC. Chris never made it himself, unfortunately. He's had a fairly decorated career himself, but I think like he's a full-time MMA coach and gym owner, and that's his passion. And I think something I picked up from him very early on is like he absolutely loves what he does. Like wakes up every morning with a big smile on his face. You can see when he's actually coaching, he's the passion that he has for it. And I suppose I don't quite have the experience to move into that kind of career path at the moment. He's been at it for 15 plus years, and he has built up that skill set over time, that love for the game. But like I suppose the influence that's had on me is trying to find my niche. Don't necessarily have it in the same kind of realm that he does, but like trying to find my niche in the business world where I can find like I suppose where I can best utilize the skills that I have, and like really wake up going to work every morning, like looking forward to it with a big smile on my face. Like that's the main thing I've seen. Like up until that point, I always had a perception of a job as a 9 to 5. You put on your suit, you get on your train or your bus, you commute, and then you commute home. You get home at 7 o'clock or 6 or however far the city you're going, and that was sort of the regimented lifestyle that I envisioned growing up. And then having met Chris and seeing that he kind of makes his job work around his lifestyle, and I don't think he probably would correct me for saying this, but I don't think money's a massive factor for him or a massive emphasis for him. It's just finding something that he loves to do, and for him, like what he often says, what I do doesn't feel like work. And I suppose the goal for me, I think I'm nearly there, and sometimes I'm not there. But the goal for me is to get to the point where like it's work isn't a task or a chore. It's play.
I like that. And let's work our way to all good things, grad guide. But if you see me reading from looking to my right, I'm reading from my screen. You were part of DCU Business School. You mentioned Samantha and Ellen. It's ranked in the top 90 business schools in Europe in 2020. One of only 3 Irish business schools to achieve this ranking. You spent 5 years in DCU. And in 2018, you finished with your master's degree in digital marketing. So my question is, what did you most like about the course that you did? And if you could change anything, what would it be and why?
It's a great question. What do I like most about the course? Like the practical hands-on experience that you actually get. So it's a 12-month long course, runs from pretty much the start of September till August 17th or 18th. So it finished up like just last week for the last class just to go through. And throughout, there's projects dotted in, mostly with social enterprises. So I think I had to do an SEO project with Recycle IT, which is a kind of a waste electrical company based down in Tala or around Walkinstown area. We ran Google AdWords for the DSPCA, the one for the animals.
Yeah, DSPCA.
DSPCA. And then in the summer term, the summer term ran for about 4 months. Like the last 4 months of it, we had an assignment with an actual client. So we had to build out a digital marketing plan, build them a website, implement the marketing plan, and then report on the results in like the form of a practicum. So essentially, it was a group of 4, and it was a dissertation between all of us, around 35,000 words. So like the main benefit that I got from the course is that in my undergrad, I didn't really feel sufficiently qualified to go out and actually work as a digital marketing executive, a digital marketing coordinator, whatever the entry level roles for marketing people would typically be, because I didn't have actually any hands-on experience doing anything. So that was a major thing for my master's. That was a massive incentive for me to go into it as well. And that, like, I did a decent amount of research before, saw that there was hands-on experience, where instead of going into an interview and saying email marketing is good for, according to this paper written in 2009, and referencing it, which is pretty much my undergraduate degree, I could talk about, right, I ran an email marketing campaign over a 12-week period, and this is how we measure success, this is what we've improved upon, and like actually getting something that you can tangibly talk about rather than kind of high-level theory stuff, which I found my undergrad, even though it was great, very good undergraduate degree, it was marketing-based degree as well, just didn't really give you that hands-on experience. In terms of what I'd change about it, Jesus, the length, I suppose, 12 months was tough. I don't really know, like, I couldn't really fault the structure of the course too much, to be honest. Like, I had the issue that I had, or issues maybe the wrong word, but like where it was difficult for me was that I had friends who'd gone into full-time work, were earning decent money, or kind of more money than I was anyway. I was working part-time for like 15, 20 hours a week. So like the time commitments for the masters was like 40 to 45 hours. On top of that, you had your part-time job. So like, if I could change anything, I would probably knock maybe 10 hours of work off of it a week, just so I could either work a little bit more, have a little bit more money. But generally, like the course structure and the practical experience, the people as well, like I touched on Ellen and Samantha there, but there's many people who I met in that course I'm still friends with to this day. So yeah, generally a pretty decent experience in DCU, as probably a testament that I spent 5 years there in total.
Well, that's, guess why it's ranked one of the top business schools in Europe. Your current business grad guide is an online career guidance and mentorship program. You can talk about that more in a minute, but I have a question before that. And it was, you spent, if my calculation is right, about 8 years working in a variety of different jobs, from brand ambassador at 98FM to digital marketing executive at Ultimate Rugby. That's not where I want to focus on. I want to focus on recent gigs that you've had before grad guide. An account executive. You served your time as an account executive. Not many people have that belt. But and it's not the easiest belt to get. Adroll was the company where you were an AE, and also Spendesk. What skills did you sharpen from your time at those 2 companies that you've carried with you to today? Could be communication skills, the ability to ask good questions, or even the ability to listen. You could think of other things as well.
Yeah, you've kind of touched on the first one there that springs to mind. I suppose if you take communication overall, and then listening as a really important element to that, like a lot of what I do now, although marketing is an element of my role as growth is building university partnerships. So there is an element of sales there, and that's kind of purpose built. That I really, really enjoy the process of selling. That's kind of probably another factor that I brought in as well. Sales is a very process driven profession in my experience anyway. With AdRoll and Spendesk, it's very much a case in my experience where you have a target you have to hit, and to hit that target you need to do X, Y, Z, and you can break that down over in the case of AdRoll, it was a quarterly target. In the case of Spendesk, it was a monthly target, which was absolutely insane to adapt to, because I don't know, it feels like 1 month ends and then obviously you just roll straight into the next, and like the pressure's back on. But you can break, like with a quarterly target, taking that as an example, you can say, right, my target over the next 3 months is X. What can I do on a weekly basis to try and work towards that, and then break that down to a day? What can I do every day? And then you can start looking at your morning, your afternoon, how even getting into the granular details, like when do I do my best work? Is it in the morning, first thing after I've had a coffee, and I can get 2 hours in before lunch, where I can absolutely fly through? In the case of a sales role, just pick up the phone and call as many people as possible. And then maybe if you have a bit of a lag in the afternoon, typically I would, especially after a heavy lunch or something like that, I might leave like kind of low impact tasks till the end of that. So like having a really clear idea of, I have this quarterly target, but how can I break it down into like bite-sized chunks to make it a little bit more palatable? And that's something that I've kind of transferred into different aspects. Now, marketing is my main focus, with elements of sales, my current role, but even in other parts of life, it's just not so much having a goal to work towards, it's having a process to follow with an idea of the direction you're going. And then I think sometimes people can get kind of stuck to this, to use the sales example, like, the target of 100K for the next 3 months, and it can be a bit overriding. But if you break it down into kind of daily tasks or hourly tasks and execute, it can be a fairly straightforward process.
I love what you said there. One of the things I do is I create a list of things I got to do the day before I go into work the next day. So rewind to last night, I was writing down everything I wanted to get done today, and then I order them in terms of, I work best in the morning. I get all my hard shit done in the morning, and then in the evening is a low impact task, because as soon as I've had lunch, I kind of go into this slump of like not as energized as I was in the early part of the day. So definitely a good tip and lesson to share. Gradguide, where did the idea come from, and what is it for those who haven't heard of it?
So Gradguide is a career guidance, mentorship and graduate recruitment platform. So I suppose our mission is to try and bridge the employment gap from college to company. So where did it come from? There's 4 co-founders. So me being one, Dave, Matthew, and Mark being the other 3. So Mark in July 2019 kind of had like the seed, I suppose, of the idea. He started kind of exploring the possibility of, like, to maybe take a back step. I found in my work experience in AdRoll and Spendesk that like I'd have people getting onto me on LinkedIn, typically grads or people who are looking to move into tech, because obviously it's quite an attractive industry to be in, saying, hey, I see you work in company X, they're currently hiring for a BDR, any chance you can jump on a call? This is before the days of Zoom. We're jumping a call or meet up for a coffee to chat through like what it's like to work there, the culture, so on and so forth. So it was very much kind of an informal process of mentoring people. I wouldn't even call it mentoring. It's just kind of advising people, I suppose, on how to work their way through
being a nice person.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, if someone's reached out to you and it's a well-written message, like this, what's 15 minutes of your time to give up just to, talk, like tell them what it's like to work in tech sales, and they can kind of figure out based on that conversation whether or not they want to pursue it, because better than most, it's a tough game to be in at the best times. But it was done very informally, and then that was July 2019, kind of moving towards the back end of 2019. There was a website built and a landing page, so very kind of basic website mark. I don't think we'll mind me saying that compared to what we currently have, where we were just kind of formalizing the process. So people would come to the landing page, sign up, and then based on their interests, which we'd find out, once they signed up, we call them, and then based on their interests, so if they say, for example, I want to work in sales and Salesforce is my dream company, we would then dip into our network, try and find them a mentor or a salesperson in Salesforce to kind of guide them through the application process. And that was sort of how it was done, like informally, until around January 2020, when myself and Mark have been friends since we were kids, like 4 or 5, used to play football to get on the same team. So had a fairly decent relationship. We met for a coffee in January 2020. He also met Matthew and Dave separately. Then the four of us came together and we decided, like, let's start putting some kind of structure to this as opposed to just doing it kind of a little bit more laissez-faire. So January 2020, we said we'd go into it full time, set up weekly meetings. I think that was the key for us, like having weekly meetings and holding each other accountable to, like, right, every Wednesday we're going to meet and we're going to have tasks to do for the following Wednesday. We're going to slowly but surely try and build out our mentorship network. So initially, four of us had all sales experience. Mark and Dave were both Intercom. Mark at the time was Chargify, and Matthew was in Amidas as working in sales. So we said, right, if someone's looking to get a job in tech sales in Dublin, we're going to try and make that process as smooth as possible, because it can be quite daunting to do 5 or 6 rounds and then get the no at the end, then you have to go back to the start of another one. So that was our initial specialization. And with salespeople being typically quite extroverted, we were able to build out a fairly decent mentorship network until about March 2020. So we had about 40 to 50 mentors at that time, typically working with 1 or 2 mentees, as we call them at the time. And then March 2020 happened and the world took a sharp left turn, and the demand for what we were offering went through the roof, because all the entry-level roles, people who were in slightly more senior positions, I actually lost my job in that role in April. So people who are kind of 2 or 3 years into their career lost their jobs, were kind of taking up all the entry-level roles, and then the grads were kind of turned around saying what's left for us, and there wasn't an awful lot. So yeah, March, April, May, June, July, August last year was absolutely insane for us. We built out the mentorship network to about, at that time, we probably doubled it. There was about 100 mentors odd by the end of last summer, and we started seeing, right, we had a lot of people signed up who wanted to get into sales, but then we also had people signed up who wanted to get into engineering, wanted to get into products, wanted to get into design, so like more technical roles. So we started saying, right, how can we, instead of turning those people away and saying we can't help you, how can we, I suppose, alter our offering or like change up the product to make it fit what the market is asking for? So we started bringing in more technical mentors, people who worked as junior software engineers, or people who are working in technical support in some tech companies around Dublin. And yeah, that's kind of through to, I suppose, late last year. We're sort of in cruise control. Had it very well set up. We ran it on a 6-week cohort basis. So a mentor would get paired with a mentee at the start of the 6 weeks. We would give the mentor resources, everything we thought would be helpful towards some kind of the basics of about your CV and your LinkedIn profile, and mock interview scenarios and prepping for behavioral interview questions and all that kind of stuff. But basically try to enable the mentors, just guide them, no pun intended, as best they could to try and land a job in what was like a really, really employer-driven market at that point. Then, sorry if I'm going down a rabbit hole here.
No, please do.
Yeah. So yeah, late last year, we and Mark met Terry Clune, who had, I think he'd been put in touch with Mark through Rory Keller, who's the CEO of Amidas, and they had a meeting, and Terry really liked I suppose what we were doing. Like at that stage, it was a CSR for us. It was a side project. Like I was working full time as a account executive in Spendesk over here in London. Dave was in Intercom, Mark was in Chargify, Matthew was in Amidas. So it was very much a passion project for us, and we benefited slightly from the fact that there was a lockdown for the majority of the second half of last year because there was nothing else to do. So we said we might as well just meet a little bit more frequently. So once a week last summer quickly became twice a week, quickly became 3 times a week. And then before we knew it, it was 15, 20 hours a week outside of our full-time jobs. But as I said, there was nothing else to do. So we were lucky in that way, in that there was no FOMO of our mates going to the pub or anything like that, because sure, everyone was sat inside their houses. And then, yeah, as we moved through the early part of this year, we started getting a bit of a sense that like we could potentially move into this full time. And obviously that's with a view to commercialize it. So in March this year, we all left our full-time roles where we were, and then April, a month later, we moved into Gradguide full-time and took up, as you touched on to start, I'm the head of growth, Dave's the head of operations, Matthew is our commercial director, and Mark's the CEO. And then, yeah, we've been at it for 4 months now, just over 4 months, and we've grown the team to, we have 2 BDRs, relationship manager, that's 7, and 5 engineers. So there's 12 in total. Now we've trebled in size over the last 4 months, which was really exciting for us. Like having the opportunity to come under the Clean Technology Group. Terry has a number of companies in the group. I'm going to be murdered for missing out one here. Meet Sprintax, Transfermate. No, slipped my mind. Transfermate. Taxback International.
I'm sure he'll forgive you.
Yeah. But yeah, there's 5 other companies in the group, so we're quite lucky in that we're under the umbrella now, where we have access to the resources of these massive, kind of massive multinational companies that have numerous rounds of investment and have extremely high valuations, and we are now sort of in an incubator. We're a startup. We're in an incubator now, where we have access to the CEOs, in my case, the CMOs of other companies, to lean on and ask for advice on. Like, we are a 12-person company at the moment, and we're successfully working with some really, really exciting companies. But how do we continue to grow and expand? And from our point of view, like, the more grads we help, students or grads, primarily grads, but we're kind of moving to the student side of it now. The more we can help, the more we can like smooth that transition from college into their first job, the more we can help, the better. From our point of view.
There's a guy in the UK called Matt Sedgwick. You should, I'll connect you with him. He's definitely worth chatting to if you want to kind of grow the market out there. I don't know if you're just focused purely on Ireland, but if you want to go into the UK, he's got some good contacts. I'm sure he's probably listening, because he texts me most days saying today's episode was good. So Matt, if you are listening, do get in contact with Ian himself.
Absolutely.
What was the question I wanted to ask you again? Oh yeah, you mentioned you started this in kind of informally January 2020. So I'm not that bad at maths, and I know January 2022 is 2 years. What if you had to pick one standout lesson from the last 20 months? What would it be?
I think probably borrowed from sales, and there might be a bit of crossover from my answer before, but having metrics, KPIs, and accountability overall, of like, we all have, for the 4 of us, we have our different functions and what we do, and there's a lot of crossover between my job and Matthew's job in the commercial team, and Dave in operations, and Mark that sits over all of us, and Hugh, who we brought in as our head of product. Having accountability for your role and being the one responsible for the success of that department, and that having kind of clear metrics of how success is measured. So instead of me saying, for example, we're running some social media marketing stuff on Instagram at the moment, some paid acquisition, and it's going really, really well. Like, that kind of stuff, it's probably not a great example, but something like that is a little bit fluffy. Like, I think you should have very clear benchmarks of how you expect to do, based on whether it's competitors in the industry or previous work you've done. And if you set that target to hit, from a marketing point of view, if I want to get a certain click-through rate or a certain CPC, or there's certain metrics I want to track, if I don't hit that metric, have a very clear explanation of why that's not the case, and then how do I work towards getting to that. And that's something that I would have borrowed from sales, where, okay, it's not that it's not a problem if you don't hit your target, but, well, it's not really, maybe consistently it's not great, but if you miss your target in a given quarter, it's not as much of a problem if you can say, yeah, no, my messaging, my emails wasn't really on point, and then I probably put too much time into LinkedIn. I could have done a little bit more time on the phones. Probably could do a power hour a week where I kind of blast through calls. So, like, I have a clear idea of, like, right, you haven't done what you need to do. You haven't hit your target or haven't achieved your KPIs. But, like, this is why, as opposed to saying, I don't know, because if you don't know why you haven't gotten to where you want to get to, you can't address the issue, and then it's going to keep happening consistently. So yeah, for us as a group, it was very much from those week-to-week meetings, and then when the meetings were a little bit more frequent, now they're daily. It's accountability for what you're doing, and holding your teammates accountable. Like, we hold each other's feet to the fire literally every single day, and it's needed. You need to clash regularly, it's particularly in a startup, because if you're kind of dancing around each other and, like, don't want to overly impose and don't want to hurt someone's feelings, like, that's the kind of stuff that it's not going to help you grow as a business, and it's not going to benefit anyone in the long run.
Yeah, agreed. There's this tool that I use probably once a quarter, where I look at the grand scope of, like, it's for pipeline management. So it's to understand, what clients do I currently have, what clients do I want to go after? What clients have I lost that I'd like to re-engage? But the whole tool is called CARE. So it stands for keep, attain, recapture, and expand. And it's like a diagram like this, simple enough, where you just write down the clients that you have that you want to keep, ones that you want to attain, ones you want to recapture that you've lost, and ones that you want to expand within the current account. Focusing on attaining clients. I've noticed that you announced within the last month, definitely, a partnership with Channelside, another Irish company. How do you plan to continue to grow? You've touched on Instagram ads, which is the reason for asking the question. And then I've noticed the partnership with Channelside. Are you just going to double down on partnerships and paid ad? Is there anything I'm missing?
Yeah, so this is more Matthew's remit. So he'll probably, I might butcher it here, but this is my understanding of what we're trying to do on the commercial side of the business. So yeah, the main focus for us, like maybe take a step back. When grads come out of college, in our experience in those early days, and they wanted to get into tech, as they refer to it as, and tech is a kind of a loaded word if you talk to grads, because they think if you're getting into tech, you need to know Python, or you need to have some understanding of coding, where they don't understand it's actually customer facing roles in tech, which don't involve any of that. That's to my relief, because I've no idea, of zero technical knowledge.
Me too.
Whatsoever. So we initially, when we're talking to grads, okay, we asked them on that initial screening call, what do you want to do, any target companies you want to work for, like general kind of high level questions, and they'd come back saying, yeah, Google, Facebook, TikTok is a new one. What are those, LinkedIn, Microsoft, like they want to go to the big multinational tech companies that are the ones they would deal with on a day-to-day basis, actually, like the direct consumer ones, and they don't know the channel sites, they don't know the intercoms, even they don't know the Wayflyers,
Teamworks, all those guys.
Yeah, they don't know the B2B companies. They wouldn't really have any reason to, unless I'm seeing there a little bit more advertising for the likes of Workday and stuff like that when the golf was on a while ago, and they're kind of that's the only real place I think grads could potentially come across these kind of massive B2B companies. But yeah, the emphasis for us was initially the gap, I suppose, in that, like, there's the likes of Wayflyer, like they got $76 million in Series A funding a month ago. Immediate got 50 million funding last year, valuing them at 575 million. Like, these companies are indigenous Irish companies that need good graduate talent, but no one's ever heard of them. And I don't think they mind me saying that, compared to Googles, to TikToks, to Facebooks, to LinkedIn. So like, where we try and come in is we present it to the companies, and that, like, we can give you access to the best graduates out there. And like, where the grads benefit a lot from is we have a career guidance aspect too, which I touched on, like the CV and the LinkedIn and the prepping through interviews and stuff. But the mentorship aspect of it, and that currently runs over a 6-week period where, right, I guess, for example, we still mentor because I just like to do it. My mentee for last time out, Jack, he came to me like literally day one, fixed up a CV in our first half an hour session. So like half an hour sessions once a week for 6 weeks. Kind of gave him some tips. He fixed it up. Following week he came. I was like, right, what jobs are you looking at applying to? Went through the full process with him, and like essentially just act as like someone there to bounce the stupid questions. I say the stupid questions, like, well, there is such thing as stupid question, but in their head they would go into an interview blind more often than not, and then kind of find themselves at a loss as to why they didn't potentially get the job. Whereas having a mentor there who you can lean on, who can kind of run through a mock interview scenario with you, or tell you how to answer behavioral interview questions using the STAR method. This kind of stuff that you don't necessarily get taught in college. Like, the resources are there to an extent, but it's different from someone who is 3 or 4 or 5 years ahead of you in the career ladder, as opposed to a career guidance counselor who's not necessarily in the industry that you're looking to get into. So like, my role, I suppose, on the university partnership side of it is working with the career guidance counselors, and how can we be an asset for you guys? How can we be a tool for your students and graduates to try and get into tech? Like, we have a very specific domain expertise in, if you want to get into a tech company, indigenous Irish tech companies, preferably, that's who we target. Also, kind of landing, like US companies moving over to Dublin, like setting up their landing teams is where we found a lot of demand as well, because they obviously don't have the same level of brand recognition. But when it comes to that, like, we know what we're talking about. Whereas if you want to do the little grad program or the Jameson graduate program, or go to the Big Four, or pursue law as a career path to your FE1s, like we would happily say we don't know what to do. We can't help you on that. And we can give you some very high level skills on how to format your CV and stuff like that. But even then, I don't know if what they're looking for in a CV in the Big Four, or what they're looking for in that application process. So we find ourselves like we've focused particularly on the tech sector, because we try and partner with fast growing companies, and fast growing and tech tend to be synonymous, particularly over the last year, where it's probably one of the few industries where that's accelerated growth, or at least accelerated considerably faster than similar industries. So we try and primarily work with those, and then within tech, it's sales, marketing, customer support, engineering, product design, HR, recruitment, any area within tech we can help out with. So to answer a long-winded way of answering your question around like our partnership strategy, we very much frame it to these companies as, for your entry-level hiring, either landing teams coming from the US or Irish companies who don't necessarily have the same level of recognition with grads as the big techies do, as they're referred to. We can help bridge that gap both ways. Grads can get great jobs with your company, and your company can get the best and brightest grads coming out of the top universities in Ireland. And now, as we look to move into the UK, it's a kind of different set of problems. But in the grand scheme of things, the Irish market is relatively small compared to the UK one. So now we're kind of looking to expand into the UK market, where obviously we have a lot more choice of companies to work with. And I think Matthew and our two BDRs we have in place, and Gemma, who've just hired as a relationship manager, I think they're well on top of things on that side of it.
Are you able to talk at all about the virtual career fair you have at the end of next month?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I suppose it came originally out of it was sort of out of the problem that we initially had as graduates. So I graduated in 2018, and I remember in my I managed to somehow miss the career fairs that was in my actual final year of my degree. I don't know if I was hungover or what was going on, but I just didn't go to them. So my second week of my master's, I think, or maybe the third week, there was grads. I don't know if they were Grad Ireland career fairs. There was something we facilitated in the Helix, and not literally, but most of the stalls there, or most of the busy ones anyway, were the Big Four ones, and what's commonly referred to as the milk rounds. So I knew at that point, obviously, I was doing a master's in digital marketing, so I was specializing in something that I didn't want to do that. But I knew from talking to friends that I had that it was often the case, and people who are in the Big Four now, I won't name check them because they're still working for those companies, that in their final year of college, in September, October time, when they're doing the milk rounds, they didn't really know what they wanted to do. There was a little bit of uncertainty, and they saw, right, this is a 3-year contract. Parents will sign off, and there's no problem because everyone's heard of KPMG and PwC. I can go here 3 years, do my my accountancy exams, the ACAAs, ACC, yeah, one of those two. And then at the end of those 3 years, well qualified, well paying job, off I go. And that's kind of dictated the timing of our virtual career fair. So we just try and position it as an alternative to the traditional grad programs and the Big Four routes. So some of the companies that we have there, I'm going to name a few off the top of my head if I can get them. I've name checked them already. Wayflyer, Metis, TransferMate, Spendesk. So that's actually our first UK-based hiring partner. So they're hiring for salespeople over in London at the moment. Chargify, Intercom, Workday. I might be leaving one or two out, but I've Fivetran. But yeah, like mainly tech companies. As I said, these companies don't have access to grads in the traditional sense. Like I don't think you'll see them at the career fair and the Helix next year. So what we're trying to do with a virtual career fair is try and give these companies, as I said, access to grads, and then grads can just go to virtual dudes. We're hosting it on a platform that I think Dublin Tech Summit might have used the same platform as well. If I might be wrong on that though. So yeah, there's virtual booths where they can go talk to recruiters from those companies and hiring managers. And then throughout the day, we'll have speakers from each of those companies and a few special guest kind of speakers as well, who aren't directly hiring partners, but they're people who are kind of C-suite or very senior positions of landing teams who are just coming to Dublin. So from their point of view, the opportunity to get in front of, we have we have a guest list, or we're working towards filling a guest list of 5,000 grads. So that's my job, I suppose, to build that audience and get as many grads we can get there as possible. And yeah, again, just serves as a way to bridge that gap from these companies that are less well known to grads who, again, you like taking Wayflower as an example. Like I think we've had 15 people go there. I might be one or two off. We've had 15 people go there in the last 12 months. And like their plans for growing like over the next 12, 18, 24 months are absolutely insane. But like the likes of these companies, if you ask the average person on the college campus if they heard of Wayflower, like chances are they probably haven't. So from our point of view, it's just showing grads that yes, the Big Four is a good route, and yes, the traditional grad programs are really, really good routes, but like there is an alternative way to go here. And if you get into the right company at the right time, there is a chance for your career to progress very, very quickly.
Final question for you, Ian. What is your personal definition of success?
To circle back, I think on what I kind of said earlier, when work becomes play, like when you're actually like I think I have it to an extent now because I really, really enjoy what I do, and I'm quite fortunate in that we've managed to get an opportunity now with a little bit of investment where we can, as I said, we're scratching our own itch in a way, because in 2018, my colleagues graduated in 2017, so a year before I did. We were in a position where we didn't really know what we wanted to do, and I think the foundation of most good businesses are when someone scratches their own itch, because no one, if you have a really, really strong understanding of what the problem is, it's easy to be passionate about it, and you can work towards finding a solution because you have a vested interest in solving it because you are suffering through it. And having a reasonably recent memory of what that problem is and how annoying it can be, firing out hundreds of applications for every job you come across on LinkedIn and Indeed and hearing nothing back, and like that kind of disheartening part of it. The fact that we get to, I suppose, spend 50 hours a week trying to solve that problem for other people is something that I really enjoy doing. Like being able to get up in the morning and be like, right, the problem I'm solving today is trying to get a stressed out graduate a job. It's not to spend as example, which is a great company. It's a spend management software solution where you're helping finance teams I suppose manage their spending, get a better oversight over how they're spending money, collect receipts easier, so on and so forth. Like it's a very, as I said, a very, very good company to work for. But it's not an itch that I felt. I'm not an accountant. I haven't worked as a CFO where I've kind of had issues of forecasting because I haven't gotten enough receipts in on time, or I haven't gotten a handle of what the outgoings and incomings are of my business. Like it's not an itch I've really felt. So it was work. Whereas this, I see it as, yeah, success is waking up every morning and feeling like you're playing, not working, and like being excited to go to work. For me, anyway, that's kind of how I'm defining it.
It's a slick answer. Ian, thanks for being my guest on the podcast today. I'll leave links below to the virtual career day, your LinkedIn and your guys' website if people are interested. But for now, we'll leave it there, and I wish you continued success.
Thanks very much, Rian, and appreciate you having me on.